Hello and Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are going to discuss Human Development Index. This is lecture 10 of our course Human Resource Development. This course is a regular course of undergraduate program Bachelor's in Science and Economics at School of Social Sciences and Humanities at NUS Islamabad. So this is lecture 10 and second in the series of online lectures because of the coronavirus thing. Today I am going to briefly discuss the concept of human development, and then we will discuss the construction and usage of Human Development Index as well as the pros and cons associated with it. So this is the aim of the lecture. Concept of human development, construction of HDI index, and data of Human Development Index 2019. So this is a 2019 report, HDR, Human Development Report of UNDP, and data is from 2018 for most countries. We will go through some of the tables, some of the modifications that they have done over the course of development in this index. We will briefly list down the limitations, which are very, very important if you want to use that index for your analysis and so on. So before we understand what Human Development Index is, we should understand what was the need for such a concept. So utilitarian view states that what matters is what is our overall satisfaction level in the economy. So society should improve in terms of the total utility. Total utility should increase, and utilitarian view kind of neglects that there are distributional aspects. There could be inequalities. They do realize the importance of diminishing marginal returns. So higher the income is, higher is the satisfaction. But after a certain level of income, the level of additional marginal satisfaction with increase in per unit increase in income goes down. That is diminishing marginal returns that you have studied many times in economics. And this is very close to Easterlin paradox as well. It's coming in the next few slides. We will discuss that there. So Human Development Report, in Human Development Reports, mostly this is what is mentioned. Basic distinction needs to be made between means and ends. Human beings are real end of all activities. So instead of simply using human capital, human labor force as input in the production function, there should be an emphasis on improving the quality of life for the humans. So because at the end of the day, what we need is to improve the quality of life, improve the general overall quality of life, and this is why humans are the real end of all activities. Why do we produce so many products? Why do we need to improve health? Why do we need to improve education? Why do we need paved roads? Why do we need better environment? All of that, at the end of the day, you want people to be happy, you want people to live a better life, and so on. So at the end of the day, you want everything that you want is for betterment of humans, and this is why sometimes we trade off the betterment of humans with the neglect for environment, sustainability, and so on and so forth. The idea is that it's not only about human as labor, it's about the improvement in quality of life. Okay. Of course, income and wealth have their value, very important value. But human development approach values health, nutrition, and basic education as ends in themselves rather than means. Wealth is a mean, the mean through which something happens. But end is where humans are, and this is what human development approach argues. So emphasis is on education, nutrition, and of course income as the mean to achieve something. The concept of human development was first proposed by Amartya Sen, and this is called Amartya Sen's concept of capabilities, which focuses on human well-being, and emphasis is on ends, as I just mentioned, rather than means, which is income per capita. In economics, most of the times we talk about GDP per capita growth. We need to increase GDP per capita. This is the most of the analysis in macroeconomics is around that, increase GDP per capita. And Amartya Sen argued that just by simply focusing on increase in income, you neglect the very important aspect of human well-being. And this is why he argued that we need something different than GDP per capita to measure the decent standard of living, human development in the real sense. So he proposed that there should be an index called Human Development Index, and health, education, and goods meaning income, things that you can buy, as a composite. There should be an index that is a composite of all these three different things. So Human Development Index here is made up of health, education, and living standards. Within health is measured by life expectancy at birth. Education is measured by mean years of schooling, which means that what is the average years of schooling in a country. And also education has two indicators. Second one is expected years of schooling. It means that a kid that is growing up right now, given the enrollment rates in primary and secondary and tertiary education, what is the likelihood that this boy or a girl will grow up to attain secondary education, primary education in his lifetime or not? So what is the expected overall years of schooling given the current enrollment rate? The reason is that mean years of schooling is telling you the output of previous education expenditures, previous enrollment ratios 10-20 years ago. But to incorporate the current progress in education sector, we need to also account for what is the future likelihood of improving human capital. So if we just focus on mean years of schooling, it ignores that if in country like Pakistan, where most of the people are young, most of them are not at the age of achieving high school degree or a college degree, certificate or degree. But if we measure the average years of schooling, they will be considered as below average, because even though they did not reach the age of achieving that degree, will be neglecting some of the efforts that if government has made some efforts to improve enrollment rates, to improve average years of schooling, those will be neglected if we just focus on mean years of schooling, because we will be ignoring what it takes some time, like 9-10 years, 12 years for the policies to show up especially in education sector. If you change something in primary education, if you change something in secondary education, it takes time, 5-6 years, 10 years for a kid to graduate. Then he'll go to a university, do something productive, and that will show up in GDP, for example. It takes a lot of time. So to achieve mean years of schooling, the kid has to go through schooling and college years and so on. And if there is some policy that in last 2 years that has increased enrollment ratios, it is likely to increase expected years of schooling later on in a kid's life that is growing up right now. And expected years of schooling tries to capture that. Okay. Living standards, this is what Amartya Sen called means of living a good life. So living standards is captured by gross national income per capita. Why gross national income, not GDP? we'll talk about it in this slide. So how do they define it? Some of the aspects I have already covered. Human Development Index, inside this index, knowledge is captured by two statistics, as I just mentioned, mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling. Long and healthy life is calculated using minimum value of life expectancy of 25 years and maximum value of 85 years. And this is the indicator that is also important to remember when we are trying to compare evolution of HDI over the period of time, because this minimum and maximum value has changed over the years. Few decades ago, in some countries, maximum value of life expectancy was 35-40 years. Now in those countries, after the improvement in health, health access and so on, in those countries, and I think those are African countries, I don't remember their names yet right now. So increase, the life expectancy has increased from 35-40 years to 60-65 years right now. So the thresholds, the limits of this index have increased over the years. So in order to make a comparison between HDI score right now and something what it was 20 years ago, then we have to make sure that the benchmarks that are being set for life expectancy, for knowledge and for decent standard of living are comparable. Because things have improved over the years and benchmarks and definitions of the indicators have also changed. Knowledge was previously captured in the early days of HDI by literacy rate. Whether a person is can read or write, that was a dichotomous variable, 0 or 1. Now you can see that it has been developed and improved. It doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean that the authors did not know or were not aware of the right proxies for knowledge. It simply means that in 1990, where the first Human Development Report was published, at that time they did not have data for detailed data for many countries to construct an index like this. So at that time, they created this index based on whatever the data was available. So now, since more and more data, more and more, not only in terms of quality but also in terms of quantity, the data is available, so they are improving indices as the data quality is also improving. Decent standard of living is measured by gross national income and per capita and adjusted for purchasing power parity, standard PPP. So GNI is something that we used to call GNP before. It's gross national income. It means that you take gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is what a country produces. Everyone within the geographical boundary of a country produces something, and that production is calculated in used in GDP. But in GNP, what GDP tells you what a geographical boundary of a country produces. GNP tells you what the nationals of that country produces. So GNI or GNP would measure if a Pakistani is living in UAE and sending back remittances, GNP will incorporate that. If somebody is living in Pakistan from Afghanistan, for example, and sending back some remittances home, GNP will subtract that. So this money is created, that money is created here but spent somewhere else. So and similarly, if Pakistanis are working in the US or UAE, working there, earning money, sending back home, so money is created somewhere else, but it has been created by a Pakistani. So it is a national, it's a product of nationals of Pakistan. So this is why HDI is important. It is talking about the humans. So humans are working within country and outside. So it incorporates this aspect by using GNI instead of GNP. Why per capita? we need to understand in terms of per capita terms what is the overall production of a country relative to the population size of that country. That way, if there is a small country, and it is of course because of the size of the country, because of the people living in it, if it is creating limited amount of income, it's not necessarily bad. So when you divide it by the limited number of people living in that country, you may find out that the per capita GDP is high, and that is the case for small European countries. Some of them are at very high level of human development index. We will see it later on. Okay, this is what we have covered already. Log of income. So as we'll see, I think in the next slide, yes, Easterlin paradox is coming in the next slide. So there is a non-linear effect. Higher the income is, better the quality of life could be, but human development does increase with increase in income. But after reaching certain level, it does not increase as much. So there is some kind of non-linearity. And log of the income is used primarily because of this. It helps in accounting for the non-linearity if you use log of income. Other indicators are not used in logs, only the income part. Easterlin paradox is the concept of happiness economics, and was theorized by Easterlin in his paper in 1974. The title is mentioned here. If you are interested, you can look into that. He found that within a given country, people with higher incomes are more likely to report being happy. So when you just simply compare people inside a country and see the evolution, distribute people according to the income and ask them if they are happy or not, you'll find out that higher income level is associated with higher level of happiness. But when you compare different countries, on average, a country with a high level of income, is that country happy also or not? You will find out what Easterlin found out was that poor countries have low level of happiness. When you increase for countries with high level of income, happiness also increases. But after reaching certain level, which is what they call simple basic needs, if the average level of income is sufficient to satisfy basic needs, after that level, there is very marginal increase in happiness when you further increase level of income. So in cross-country analysis, higher level of income not necessarily increase happiness linearly. After reaching certain threshold, the effect of income on satisfaction goes down. Okay, this is what is mentioned here. And one of the examples of United States is also mentioned here. And then we have a need to account for the distribution of income. So not only income, but also human development. So we'll see later on that in recent versions of human development reports, UNDP has been creating inequality adjusted human development index. But in the traditional version of human development index, it does not account for the inequality, income inequality. Distributional effects are very, very important. As I was saying before, many of the things that new versions of the report is accounting for is already mentioned in the earlier papers of Amartya Sen. So it's not that he did not know. It's because of some of the concepts could not be transformed into quantitative analysis because of lack of data. Now that we are getting more and more reliable data, the index has been improving. Aggregate measures lose a lot of information. Of course, this is why some of the econometric panel regression analysis is not accepted in top quality journals, because of this realization that macroeconomic panel data, even though in some cases is very informative, it's not always the best. So this is because it loses a lot of information. You lose a lot of information when you are aggregating indices. So in this case, for example, if you simply aggregate income of every individual, then you ignore the fact that there is high level of income inequality. So this is what they have tried to account for in the later versions of HDI, but traditional version of HDI is still used in many contexts. Then if you want to create an index that accounts for the distribution, then you have to have both average value and also the distributional pattern. You cannot have one or the other. You have to have both of them. And also there should be a mechanism to find out which one is dominating. Is distributional pattern dominating, or is average value dominating? Because if distributional factor is increasing and average value is decreasing, it is quite possible that these two will cancel themselves out. But as a researcher, you should know what were the dynamics behind the no change in the index. We will see later on that in some countries, HDI did not change much over time. And that's one of the reasons is that there are some movements in the sub-indicators, but they cancel themselves out. Okay? The concept of poverty is included through the inclusion of income in this. So this is what this slide is trying to tell. The means to other ends is income, and lower the income is, higher the level of poverty. This is what in poverty is kind of indirectly included in HDI index. This is what this slide is trying to tell. Life expectancy is also a kind of it has intrinsic value, and which income does not capture, of course. And so a measure of life expectancy tells you that if you can eat well, if you have good health access, then you live longer. So it indirectly tells you that there is a good quality of life, at least in terms of health, in that country. So higher the life expectancy, higher is the level of development, human development. This is why this measure is used. But like income inequality, there is also a disparity between males and females. Okay, so but the problem is that accounting for gender biases or gender inequality is not very easy. Even for developed countries, having different indicators for male and female is tough, especially when it comes to income distribution. We need not only income distribution but also fertility rates. We also need wages, we also need health indicators, we also need education indicators. In developed countries, they are relatively easily available, but for many developing countries, they are very hard to find. Literacy and education, this is what I have told already. In previous versions, they used to have literacy rate. Now they have incorporated two new versions of education: mean years of education, mean years of schooling, and expected years of schooling. I have explained in the earlier slide what these two mean. Okay, so how is the HDI index created? So this formula is called deprivation version. There is another version called attainment version. So what are these two versions? So I'll try to explain it in this slide, and then we'll go to an example of data, hypothetical data, and we'll see what these two indices mean. So for each of the subcomponents, we have education, we have health, we have living standard or GNI. We have to calculate this indicator called I. For X variable, for example, this is the education variable. You take all countries, let's say 120, 130 countries, and you take the maximum value of this index, let's say health index, and subtract each of the country's health index from this and divide it by maximum and minimum. What it tells you is that how far each country is from the leader. So if I'm talking about education, then maximum will tell you out of the, for example, 120 countries, what is the maximum level of education attained by any one of the countries. Let's say Norway has 22 years of education on average. That is the highest level. So I'll put 22 here. Then let's say I'm calculating it for Pakistan. So Pakistan has, let's say, 14 years of education on average. I'll minus this 22 minus 14, and it will give me 8. I'm 8 years behind the leader in terms of education. And then I have to divide it by the total range. This is the maximum of education, this is the minimum. So let's say 22, it will repeat whatever the number here is, it will repeat here, and minus the minimum. Let's say minimum is 4 years of education. Some African country, for example, has 4 years of education as the minimum in the sample. You subtract maximum from minimum, you get the total range. And what this formula does is that, let's say if I want to calculate this index for Norway, right? In my example, in the maximum education, 22 years was for Norway. If I want to calculate this index right here for Norway, this is 22. Since I am calculating it for Norway, this will also be 22. In Pakistan's case, it was 14, so I put 14 here. But now, since we are calculating it for Norway, I'm putting 22 here. 22 minus 22, this whole thing becomes 0. This whole index becomes 0 because this is numerator will be 0. Now, imagine that if this calculation is done for a country which has the lowest level of education. So, that same country which is shown here, if the lowest level of education is 4 years, then this will be 4, this will be 4. We already know that max values are the same, so max minus minimum, max minus 4 minimum, and max minus 4 because this is also minimum. So this will be this divided by this, same number divided by same number, it will be 1. So because this is a deprivation index, it will be higher for the countries who are doing poorly. For the country which had lowest level of education, this will be 1. So 1 is the highest level in this index. For the country that is doing the best, the highest in the list, will have this whole index equal to 0. So its deprivation will be 0 at the minimum level. So this is how you can calculate, you can create a relative index. This will be the relative index for each of the indicators. Okay. Similar thing you can also do differently, which will be the attainment index. This index told you how far you are from the leader. This index will tell you how much ahead you are of the poorest performing country. So you have to subtract, these numbers remain the same. You have to subtract for each country, let's say again for Pakistan, still using the same example. If Pakistan has 14 years of education, subtract 4 from it, because in my example there was some African country with 4 years of education, subtract 4 from it and divide it by maximum minus minimum. In this case, if I calculate this index for that African country, so it will be 4 here minus 4 because 4 is the minimum, and this whole thing will be 0. If I calculate it for the leader in education, this will be maximum minus minimum, this whole thing will be 1. So in this case, the highest achiever will get 1. In this case, we had, because this is a deprivation index, higher the index is, higher is the deprivation. Here, higher the index is, higher is the attainment. Better it is for us. So higher the number, higher, better it is for us. If x minus minimum is higher, it means that I'm doing much better than the other countries. Okay, and you calculate it for 3 different sub indices and take the simple average. Okay, to get a better idea, about deprivation and attainment indices, I think this is a spelling mistake. This is a very simple example. So percentage of people who can read or write in different countries, let's call them country 1, 2, 5 countries. These are country numbers. And for the formulas that we saw in the PPT slide, we need minimum and maximum. So I have put this formula, minimum. Okay, so minimum of this range right here, it gives me 15%. So this is the minimum and it gives me here. Maximum, I give it this formula, maximum of the same range, it gives me 50. This is right here. For deprivation, this is the formula I have put. For I have put this dollar signs because I don't want to change these two numbers, because for each country these two numbers do not change. Minimum and maximum will always remain the same for all the calculations that I'm doing in this column right here. Okay, so I am putting everything in dollar signs so that if I change the columns, if I change the rows, these rows will change, but these columns, these cells will not change, because I need to keep them the same for every calculation. So what this is doing is that D3 is maximum. So it is subtracting B3, the value of this country, from the maximum, dividing by maximum minus minimum. Minimum is in C3. This is 3, this is C3, this is minimum. Okay, and this gives me 0. So the deprivation for the first country is 0, because this country is also the country with highest level of education. So the maximum value is for the same country. This is why the deprivation is 0. There is no deprivation at all. Okay, and deprivation is highest for this country here, because this is at the bottom of the table, not in terms of the position, but in terms of the minimum value. So 15%, and as I mentioned before, this is 1 because this is the highest level of deprivation. Okay. Same is for is the same equation that I show for attainment is added here. So just to show you what dollar signs do, when I drag this formula down, so it changes this column right here, these cells right here, because I did not put dollar signs. It did not change these two cells because I don't want to. Otherwise, it would take these two cells right here. I don't want to do that. Okay, and in this case, we have subtracted the original current actual value of the country from the lowest level value, minimum value C3, and divide by maximum minus minimum. And in case of deprivation, the first country had 0 deprivation. Attainment, in case of attainment, it's 1 is the highest level of attainment, and lowest level of attainment is for this country which had minimum value of education. I hope that it's clear. Okay, going back to our slides. Once you have either one of these indicators, you can use a simple average. This is a simple average. Add these 3 indices up, divide by 3, giving them the same weight, because I'm dividing it by 3, so I'm giving them the same weight. Okay, so these are the numbers. based on, I took this from Human Development Index 2019. You can find this a very detailed data set online for free. I highly recommend you to go through the data and have a look for yourself. You'll find many interesting insights for different countries, for your own country as well, in this data. So that's very, very useful. Norway has been the top performing country in terms of HDI for a long, long time. Most of the countries that you see in the top 4 are from Europe. Then you see Iceland, also Sweden, Netherlands, Denmark, Finland. These are mostly Belgium, Liechtenstein, the Austria. Most of them are, these are European countries. Some countries in the middle like Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, these are outside Europe. So, but these European countries have been in top 20 for long time now. They some of them changed positions, but they remain up around the high ranks in HDI. And these are the subcomponents of the HDI index. An interesting thing to notice here is that Singapore has the per capita GDP of 83,793. This is even higher than Norway. See, so if you rank these 20 countries, it's even higher for Liechtenstein here, 99,000. So when you rank these 20 countries, according to GNI, Liechtenstein will be the first country, but it's at number 18 because in terms of expected years of schooling, it does not do as well as Norway. Norway is 18.1, it's 14.7. Okay, it's also slightly lower in life expectancy as compared to Norway. So this is where some of the marks get cut, and it's very minor difference in mean years of schooling, but it does have a significant impact on how the HDI index tells us where this country is standing. Okay, and this is Australia, 44. This is more than double, right? This for Liechtenstein, this is the GNI per capita is, as compared to Australia, this is more than double. But Australia is 6th in the list. Liechtenstein is 18th, and this is again because of the low scores, relatively lower scores as compared to Australia in life expectancy. Expected years of schooling are much higher in Australia, and this is also 12.7. This is higher than even higher than Norway, Australia, but it scores less in terms of GNI per capita. This is why Australia is number 6th and Norway is number 1. So very interesting comparison right here. So these are the lowest rankings at bottom of the table. You can see that many countries have even less than 1,000 GNI per capita, but it's not the only reason why they are at the bottom. For Niger, for example, and Niger has been one of the at the bottom of the table for many years. Mean years of schooling is 2, and expected years of schooling is 6.5. Which is very, very low. And then we have life expectancy at birth. It's not that bad as compared to the other countries in this list, but for most of the countries, mean years of schooling is quite low, which is why they are at the bottom, and also GNI per capita is very low. This is why one of the reasons why they are at the bottom. Okay. Since we are in Pakistan, it makes sense to compare Pakistan with other countries. The important thing to notice here is that Pakistan, I mentioned Cameroon and Solomon Islands here because this is the part I've taken from the spreadsheet of UNDP. Even though Pakistan belongs to this section right here of medium human development, but it's at the very bottom. Only Solomon Islands is below Pakistan. Okay, so right after this point, if Pakistan goes below 2 ranks, it will be in low human development, and that's not a very good sight. That's not something to be taken lightly. Okay. So one of the observations is this. Then compare the Human Development Index of Pakistan 0.56 with the medium human development countries. So it's quite significantly lower than the mean of medium human development. This is what this ranking is also showing us, that 2 more steps and it will be out of this this category. Okay. Same goes for if you compare for medium human development, 69.3 is the life expectancy on average. Pakistan has lower. 11.7 is the expected years of schooling. Pakistan has lower. 6.4 is the mean years of schooling. Pakistan has lower. And 6,240 GNI per capita is the average for medium human development. Pakistan is lower. So Pakistan is not doing very well in all these indicators, and if it wants to stay in this medium human development, then it needs to improve things. For developing countries, even as compared to developing countries, Pakistan is doing much worse than other developing countries. Each and every number is higher than other developing countries on average. Regions, South Asia, I think it makes more sense to compare with only South Asia. 0.642, much higher. 69.7, again much higher than Pakistan. 11.8, again higher than Pakistan. 6.5, mean years of schooling higher than Pakistan. 6,794 GNI per capita higher than Pakistan. So this is not a very good picture for Pakistan. Okay, of course, on average, because average for the world includes many developed countries, highly developed countries, high income countries. So this average is supposed to be higher, but even as compared to the relatively comparable countries, Pakistan is not doing very well. We can see it from these numbers. Okay, so in terms of ranks, so on the left side you see the HDI rank 1 to 20. Now this is the Human Development Index that we have seen already. What this column tells us is that if we rank these countries by their GNI, right, and subtract the HDI rank from it, then we will find out this number. Okay, so it means that if we rank Norway in terms of GNI, its rank will be 6. So it means that Norway is doing better in other indices, other aspects of life expectancy, expected years of schooling, and mean years of schooling. This is why its rank is above it at the top, not because of the GNI rank. Okay, so these are the differences in ranks for many countries. For Germany, for example, their rank is 19th, but their HDI rank is 4. So this tells you that they are doing much better in terms of mean years of schooling. This is the rank. They are at the top. Expected years of schooling is 16. Life expectancy rate is 20. They are ranked at 27th level. So this table is telling you that there are because there are 4 different indicators at play here. The weights are given equally. So it's not only GNI, and that was the purpose of creating this index. It's not only income that is deriving the living standard. It's also the education and also the health level for these countries that is deriving how human capital, human development is mentioned here. Okay, so this compares the top performers. The same thing, difference between GNI ranks per capita and HDI ranks per capita, not per capita, HDI ranks. These countries right here, these are the countries with the high human development. Okay, so these numbers are high. These numbers are telling you that when you rank in terms of GNI, these countries rank much below. But when you rank in terms of HDI, these countries have much higher value, and this is why this number is so high. So 43 places. Cuba jumps up 43 places when we account for life expectancy and education. On the contrary, these are the countries that are dominated by GNI. For example, in terms of GNI ranking, Kuwait has 5th number. But in terms of HDI ranking, its rank is 57th. So there is a big difference of minus 52, meaning that Kuwait has high income because of oil, Iraq also, Qatar also. These are the countries with oil income. These countries have very high income level, but the other indicators are not really good. That's why they are GNI dominating. So their weight their GNI is much higher, but the other indicators are not that good. And at the bottom we have Pakistan. Pakistan does not belong to these categories but since we are sitting in Pakistan, it makes sense to look where Pakistan is. So if we rank Pakistan in terms of GNI, it would rank better. So it would be 135 at 135th number in the world. But in terms of HDI, it ranks at 152. So in terms of income, we are doing slightly better. But in terms of HDI, we lose 17 ranks when we include health and education in the picture. Over the time, how many places a country has jumped. So this is the 2013 to 2018, these are the top performers. Ireland has jumped in 5 years, it has jumped 13 places. Thailand 12 places, Botswana 11 places. Some of the familiar countries here for Pakistanis, Bangladesh has jumped 5 places in 5 years. That's a very good achievement. Annual growth rate in HDI is for Bangladesh is 1.95%. That's a good number. Okay, and these are the annual growth rates for 1990 to 2000. 1990 to 2010 growth rate for Bangladesh is 1.65%. Again, very good, not bad at all. These cells are empty because for these countries we did not have value for earlier years. Okay. These are the bottom of the table. So these countries have, of course, these are economic and war hit countries: Venezuela, Yemen, Syrian Arab Republic, South Sudan, Qatar. Strange, these countries have lost 26 places. Venezuela, minus 18 for Yemen, and the growth in human development has been negative for South Sudan. Then we can have a look at Pakistan's performance in this regard. Pakistan, this is the bold one is Pakistan here, and it has lost 1 place since 2013 and 18. Instead of increasing, improving ranks, we have lost 1 place. In the same region, India has gained 1 place. Bangladesh we have already seen. Indonesia did not changed the position. It's at the same place. China has jumped 7 places. Sri Lanka 2. Iran has lost 3 places. So overall, Pakistan's growth of HDI is not bad. Overall HDI growth from 1990 to 2018 is not bad. But as we saw before, that these are relative indices. So as compared to other countries, we have not done very well. Again, compare this growth rate with the low human development, we are lower than that. Compare with developing countries, slightly better. Compare with South Asia, lower than that. Least developed countries, even lower than least developed countries. So we have to improve upon this. So if ranking, of course, we cannot rank these sub-regions, but in terms of growth also, we need to improve. Okay. And so we talked about the lack of incorporation of income inequality in HDI. So this is one of the new additions to HDI in recent reports that they have published. These are the gainers right here. These are 10 countries, I think. These are also 10 countries. Losers. Gainers are the ones who gain some positions when you account for the income inequality. So it means that these countries right here, Czechia, which was Czech Republic before, Slovenia, Japan, Finland, Iceland, Denmark, Slovakia, Belarus, Ukraine, Sweden. So these are the countries whose loss to the overall human development index because of the inequality adjustment is not that big. So these are the lowest losses. 3.6% is the loss in inequality adjusted human development for Japan. It means that inequality is quite low in Japan, and in all these countries actually the loss is highest level is 6.7% of the HDI. These are the losers. Because of the incorporation of income inequality, they lost a lot of positions. So 45% loss is in Comoros, Central East African Republic, because income inequality is very high in these countries. So they lose a lot of value in human development because of the adjustment of income inequality. They also have a version on gender equality. We can have a look on that, but it tells the similar story. Okay, we have to. So you have to look into the different aspects of income inequality, gender inequality when you are looking at HDI, and they have done their best to gather as much data as possible for number of countries, and the data set that they provide is very, very interesting and can be very useful for research. Okay, so limitations. This is the last slide for this lecture. HDI fails to account for the qualitative factors such as cultural identity, political freedom, human security is one of the examples, gender opportunities, respect for human rights, etc. These are not incorporated. Kind of, I think these are listed as limitations, but I think this is more of a wish list. Every index has its limitations. I don't think that we can incorporate everything under the sun in one index. These are wish lists, and everything that can be incorporated, they have tried to create different versions of it, but the traditional version stays there. Okay. GNI per capita does not account for the income inequality, but they have created income inequality version of HDI. Now you can have a look at it, but the traditional version does not have this. Purchasing power parity changes quickly because purchasing power parity, what it does is that it compares the purchasing power of $1 in every country, and it instead of just comparing money with money directly, it compares the purchasing power in every country, and it changes. Purchasing power changes, and it also affects the index, because the GNI is mentioned in PPP terms. As I mentioned, it's not a limitation, but it's kind of a limitation and conclusion slide together. So as I mentioned, in 2010 we have new versions of HDI index, different types of index that you can have a look and compare countries with each other. So they are trying to account for some of the limitations of the previous versions, but at the end of the day, again, this is a very good indicator to measure the relative performance across countries, and it tells you, even though if you are doing much better with as compared to yourself in previous years, as compared to the other countries, you're not doing very well. That was the case with Pakistan as well. Our GDP has been increasing, enrollment rates have been increasing, health indicators are improving, poverty is declining. But when you compare with other countries, it seems that other countries are doing much better than us. They are growing faster than us. So to keep pace with the world, we have to improve our performance even further. Okay, so this concludes our lecture on Human Development Index. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you with the next video. Thank you.